Hey, good morning, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Chilling out in my garage, as you can see. It's a nice day, so I open the door, get some privacy, hang out in the garage with all my cool toys, and give you the lecture from here. All right, so last time we met, I told you that there was going to be a writing assignment this time, and there absolutely is, but we're going to go through some other stuff before that. Um, Remember how we do this. I am here. I'm not really looking at the screen. I do have the comment section up. So if somebody does make a comment, I can hear it. I mean, I can see it, but I'm not looking at my face. I'm not looking at myself do this. I have the slides open, right? So I posted the slides at 8:25 today. You should have opened them up and looked at them a little bit. You would have noticed that they are very, very, there's not too many. There's only a few. That is because we're getting to the writing assignment. The reason why I'm doing the live stream before in the first half hour of the class this time instead of the last half hour of the class is that I want you to have the ability to have, because there's a video you have to watch and then you can start writing in the second half. So I figured I'd get out what I have to get out first, and then you guys can go do your thing. All right. So last time we met, which was, I think, I don't know what it was, Friday, we talked about the Green Revolution. We talked about that natural way that farmers were moving crops around and getting a better yield, getting more food. And then we talked at the end of that lecture, we talked about GMOs, which was the genetically modified organisms, how science took that and sort of broke the ceiling and went up one bit, right? So we talked about GMOs really quickly. And there were a couple articles that talked about GMOs, whether they were good, whether they were bad, the pros and the cons. So we're going into that again today, but we're going into what is called genetic engineering. So I'm looking at the slides. I'm looking at the very first title slide, and it says, how does genetic engineering impact food? Okay. So GMOs are those genetically modified organisms, which we're going to learn about. Genetic engineering is the process of doing that. So genetic engineering is the process or the science of making GMOs, right? Genetically modified organisms. You can make plants, right? You can genetically modify plants, animals, whatever. Anything that has DNA in it, you can modify. So I'm going to go to the slides and start yapping a little bit about that. I am skipping slide 2 because that's the agenda. Skipping slide 3 and slide 4 because that is a review for you to do at your leisure. And I am on slide 5 right now. So it says, after this lesson, you should be able to describe what genetic engineering is, okay? We are going to just sort of get the general gist of things. We're going to talk a little bit about genetic engineering, just the general gist of it. It's a very, very, very complex subject of how it actually works, but I need you to understand the basics of it. Also going to identify the impacts that genetic engineering may have when used in agriculture. So you're going to look at the pros of genetic engineering. You're going to look at the cons of genetic engineering. All right. So that's the objectives. So I'm moving to slide 6. And slide 6 has a link on it. There are 2 links on it, but you are doing the link. You are not now. You are going to click the link that's between the 2 arrows. So the longer link, the link that says nature documentaries dot whatever, you are going to be clicking that link and you are going to advance the video. It's like a full movie, like a documentary. You're going to advance the video to 1 hour and 38 minutes, not 1 minute, 38 seconds, 1 hour and 38 minutes. You're going to watch that video for 12 minutes. That really explains genetic engineering pretty well and what science is doing. They're using potatoes as an example. So for that 1 hour and 38 minutes to that 1 hour and 50 minutes, I want you guys to watch that video and sort of get a little bit more about what genetic engineering is all about. All right. So what is genetic engineering? The rest of this slide gives you an example. All right. So I sort of need to, genetic engineering is taking the genes, right? Because we know DNA, right? Genes. We have genes, just a bio review. We have genes for our eye color. We have genes for how tall we're going to be. We have genes for our predisposed conditions, like a gene for diabetes or a gene for asthma or something like that, right? We have a lot of genes. We have millions and millions of genes in our DNA. Genetic engineering is manipulating those genes, is figuring out which gene does what and removing it for some reason and maybe putting it into something else where it could be beneficial. All right. So genetic engineering is messing around with DNA, is messing around with genes, is removing genes, adding genes to living things, to organisms, plants, or animals, to modify them in some way. All right. An example, and that's on this slide. An example is corn. Caterpillars like to eat corn. Okay. So scientists, now we can spray pesticides all over the fields to kill the caterpillars, but that's going to kill all the good bugs. That's going to put poison all over the corn. It's going to be a problem, right? So we don't like pesticides and flying over and dumping poison all over things. So what scientists do is they find out what caterpillars, what can kill a caterpillar, right? Well, like what kind of toxin or what kind of material or what kind of something can kill caterpillars. Things that kill caterpillars don't kill us. Things that kill us might not kill something else, right? It's not like if something's toxic, it's toxic to everything. So they find something that's toxic to caterpillars, all right? Now, we know that there's a lot of toxins in the world. We know there's poisonous plants. We know there are poisonous animals. We know there are a lot of toxins, things that are foul tasting, things that can hurt us, right? So science finds whatever it is, whatever toxin affects caterpillars. Let's say they find it in a plant, in a poisonous plant, right? They look at the DNA and they isolate the gene that makes that poison in the plant, right? So now they found the instructions, because that's what DNA is, instructions. They found the instructions on how to make toxin, how this plant makes toxin. They can isolate that gene. They can remove that gene. They can then incorporate that gene into the corn cells. So if they put that into the corn cells in seeds, into the plant cells themselves, the plant cells will incorporate that gene into their DNA. So now part of the corn's instructions is to make that toxin. So now this corn grows and it does everything it usually does. You don't see anything. It doesn't change anything. It's just that there's an extra instruction in the DNA that makes the toxin. Now, again, this isn't toxic to us, right? These are research things, and they make sure they're not going to do something stupid like that. But caterpillars don't like it, whether it kills them or whether it just turns them off and they don't want to eat it. So now if caterpillars come into your field and they eat that corn, they're not going to eat it. You've protected this corn from the caterpillars. That's genetic engineering, right? So there are really good examples, and there are other different examples. Sometimes we don't take a gene. So another quick example is like a sunflower. Sunflowers grow really, really fast. If you've ever seen a sunflower grow, they go from nothing to 12 feet. They're huge. They're amazing, right? Also pumpkins. Pumpkins grow really fast. If you ever grow a pumpkin, like a couple pumpkin seeds, it will take over your backyard. It looks like a vine, and it just keeps growing, and the pumpkins are just like, they're like weeds. So if you took this sunflower and you could look into that sunflower's DNA and you can isolate the gene, and it might not just be one, it might be a couple of genes that are responsible for making this sunflower grow fast. If you can find those genes and isolate those genes and take those genes and incorporate them into the DNA of, say, corn or wheat or some other crop that we need for food, you can have this stuff grow very fast. And then you would have corn, instead of waiting a couple of months for corn, you could have corn in a couple of weeks, right? And then you can make more and more food. So that's an example of genetic engineering. There's also examples where they make plants more disease resistant, like with the caterpillars, and they make them more weather resistant. They'll take the genes from plants that can grow way into the winter, right? Or even through the winter, plants that can really survive in cold weather, and they'll incorporate that. They'll isolate those genes that keep them growing in cold weather, and they'll incorporate them into the DNA of plants that usually die by October. And those plants actually live longer into the winter. So that means you can harvest more food. Tons of examples. There's other examples. I put up an article yesterday, and it's hysterical. It's awesome. It's wacky genetic engineering things. So scientists have done some pretty crazy things with genetic engineering. For instance, onions, when you cut onions, right, you cry a lot of the time, right? It's that there's a chemical that gets released when you cut an onion, and it makes your eyes cry and burn like crazy, right? It's kind of like you get maced if you get a really fresh onion. So scientists have found the gene in the DNA of onions that is responsible for making that chemical. So they remove that chemical. They remove that gene that makes that horrible chemical, right? They remove it. The onion grows the same. It grows the same size. It tastes the same. It looks the same. It smells the same. But when you cut it open, it no longer made that chemical. So that chemical is not there and your eyes don't water. So they have made waterless onions, which I think is very cool. But this article says some really wacky stuff. You should check it out. One of them that makes me laugh all the time is spiders make webs, right? And that fiber, scientifically speaking, when you look at it on a molecular level, that fiber is some of the strongest fiber in the world. I mean, we cannot duplicate that fiber. We cannot remake that fiber to be amazing. So spiders will create those webs. If science could somehow extrapolate those webs and make them bigger, they would have a very, very strong material, rope, whatever they wanted to do, right? So, but spiders don't make enough. They can't have a million spiders making webs, and their webs are very thin. It's too thin, right? So what they do is they find in the spider the protein that is responsible for making this web fiber. They take that gene out. They implant that gene into the DNA of a goat, all right? So now the goat inside of its DNA is making this protein, this fiber. They put it into the cells that make milk. Every time this goat is milked, because we know we milk goats like we milk cows, every time this goat is milked, it creates millions and millions of these fiber proteins. So then they just isolate those proteins from the milk, and they have tons of this super strong fiber. It's crazy. Goats are making webs. That's some crazy stuff. That article that I posted yesterday says some really, really cool things. Glow in the dark animals, glow in the dark cats, right? You can take the gene that makes fish glow and you can put it in other things to make it. It's insane. So genetic engineering is removing genes to make something better, is to take a gene out and put it into something else where it would benefit, right? So there's a lot of different things going on there. I'm going to move to slide 8 so I can show you what you're responsible. When you get to slide 8, there's a link, and that link will bring you to articles. When you click on that link and you look on the right-hand side, the word focus is there, and there's a bunch of titles to different articles. You are looking at 2 articles from this list. One of them is weighing the GMO argument for, and one is weighing the GMO argument against. So these 2 articles talk about the pros, the fors, genetic engineering, and the against, the cons against genetic engineering. All right. So there's a bunch of them. When I look at it real quick, I click on weighing the GMO argument for some of the benefits. We've already said some of them. Resistance to stress. So resistance to pests, right? Resistance to weather, things like that. They can genetically engineer food to be stronger, more nutritious. I think I talked Friday about protein in rice in Asia. Excuse me. Asia, I made a mistake with the protein. Well, actually, protein was a thing too. But one of the other things that people in Asian countries are very lacking because of their diet is vitamin A. So there's not a lot of vitamin A in a lot of the food that people from that part of the world eat. So science has isolated vitamin A, incorporated into the DNA of rice. So now rice, when it grows, has vitamin A in it. That's pretty cool. So now people don't have to worry about being vitamin A deficient. Right? Protective farm animals, you can add genes that might make cattle raise their milk yield, right? Need to be milked more and you can get more milk. So there's things like that. We talked last week about more food from less land. You don't need to increase your land mass to increase your food quantity, which is a good thing. Then there's a lot of other ones I want you to look through. Some of them are very, very interesting. Vaccines and medicines, that's way down towards the bottom. Vaccines and medicines are very cool. Doctors are now scientists and doctors are working together to put vaccines for certain diseases into into plants or into things that we eat, vegetables, right? So it's called farming with a PH, pharmacy and farming, right? So what was the example I read yesterday? Oh, but I don't remember what food. Bananas. I think it's in that article I sent you. And I believe, I may be mistaken about this, but this is the gist of it. They can they can incorporate vaccines into the DNA of bananas. So, for instance, I think they used a vaccine which helps prevent HIV. So, they grow these bananas and it has the vaccine, or not HIV. There was something about HIV. But what is the vaccine that I'm trying to think of? I forgot what it is, but you guys can look it up. But they take bananas and they incorporate the vaccine to a disease. Let's just say it's coronavirus. Let's say we figure out a vaccine for coronavirus, right? And if you know what a vaccine is, and I won't get too into it, a vaccine is like a deadened form of the virus itself, right? So uh, you put this deadened form, this un it can't get you sick. I'm trying to think of the word and I can't, so it's not important. But it's like a deadened form of the virus, and they put it into you through a needle, and it goes into your system. Now it's a deadened form, so it can't get you sick. It's not a live, active version, but your body recognizes it and makes antibodies to kill it. Your immune system goes into action and kills it, right? What that means is now, anytime you're exposed to the real thing, so if there was a vaccine for coronavirus and I had it, and I put the vaccine in me, my body would know what to do to kill that virus. And then the next time I get it, if I really get it out in the world, my body already has mounted an immune response to it. So it knows how to act. It's seeing it for a second time and it knows how to act. So that's what a vaccine is. So science is making vaccines, taking vaccines for certain diseases and implanting them into the DNA of plants. So as the plant grows, the vaccine is just in there. So now you don't have to go for a shot, right? So you don't have to go for a flu shot every year, because if you're eating bananas or whatever, you're getting that vaccine naturally. So that's kind of cool. I think that's cool too. Anyway, you look through all of these. The against, there's a lot of things, and most of the argument about the against is that we haven't done this long enough, and we don't know the consequences of manipulating DNA. Who are we? We're switching DNA around, right? So you don't know what can happen. Your DNA, and it's in here, something about sleeper genes somewhere. Uh, your DNA is made up of all of these genes, and some of them are turned on and some of them are turned off, right? That's just the way it is. They're not always activated. Some of them are active and some of them are inactive, sleeper genes, they call them. And throughout your life, depending on what you do and how you live, and just randomly, genes will get turned on. Some genes will get turned on that were never on. Some genes will get turned off that were on. Your genes work in very interesting ways. So, you don't know what's going to happen when you add a gene. So you may be adding a gene to a corn plant so it can kill caterpillars, but you're not sure how that gene is going to react when it gets into the DNA. It might turn off other genes inside of that corn that are responsible for very important things, right? Or it may turn off genes that were responsible for very important things. So you don't know what it's going to do when you put it in there. You know you're putting it in there in good faith and you're doing it for a good reason, but you have no idea if it's going to start a chain of events. So that's a problem. Okay, and there's a lot of other problems. And one of the biggest things, and if you took, I don't know, I have to ask Caffrey. I keep saying his name, but if you took Caffrey in ethics, this may have come up. Um, Humans, we have DNA, right? We're animals. We already manipulate the DNA of plants because they don't have feelings, and animals because they can't say no. But what about humans, right? So that's a huge debate. If we can do this and we can manipulate DNA, then I can, walk into a genetic engineering company and say, okay, well, my wife's pregnant and I want my child to have blonde hair and be 6'3" and have blue eyes, right? Um, I want to make sure my son doesn't have any diseases. I want to make sure it's a son and not a daughter. I want to make sure they have no diseases. I want to make sure they don't have premature baldness. I want to make, you could, their intelligence has to be off the charts, blah, blah, blah. You could engineer a human. This is future, but is that right? That sounds like that sounds like everyone's always going to want the best, right? They're never going to go in and say, hey, I want my kid to have heart disease when they're 20. No, no one's going to do that. So there are some ethics involved, right? There are also some other ethics involved, which talk about uh, good things with humans, right? So things like diseases and stuff. If we could eliminate these diseases just by manipulating some DNA, that would be a very powerful thing, right? If you could make sure that you're never going to have heart disease, or if we can find some way to manipulate your DNA where it never gets turned on in the way the cancer genes do that, um, that would be a wonderful thing. So there's a lot of different goods and bads. It's a very hot science topic about, people are very, very for, very, very against. Anyway, back to the slides, and we will go to the last slide, which basically tells you what you got going on. You are, which is going to be graded, of course, you are, here it comes, going to pick a side. So you're going to read through these articles. You're going to watch that video on potatoes. You're going to check out YouTube if you want. You may already have a side picked. You're going to pick a side. Are you for genetic engineering? Are you against genetic engineering? You can't go in the middle. I don't want any middle people. I don't want any, yeah, kind of, but just a little bit. No. If we unleash genetic engineering across the board, we unleash it across the board. All right. So take a stance. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Right. I mean, you can take a stance and say, yeah, it's a good thing. It needs to be regulated by government officials or whatever. But that could always be a problem too, because we know the government's not always in our best interest. I'm going to let you go with that. One is too short. I don't know why I wrote one, but you are going to write at least 2 paragraphs, picking a side for GMOs and genetic engineering. Are you for it or are you against it? If you are for it, you're going to provide evidence, right? Not just personal anecdote, but also evidence, scientific evidence of why you feel it's a good thing. Not just, it could feed a lot of people. That's cool. You can put that in there, but I need science too. I need you to look through those articles. I need you to pull out some interesting things. I need you to go find stuff. I don't want, anyone could say, oh, GMOs, they're good because they can make a lot of food and that'll feed a lot of people. And there's a lot of people starving. I get it. That could be in there, but that doesn't do it for me. You need to give me some science. All right. Give me some of those things from the articles, look up something about that. Give me something good. And then I also want you to tell me why the thing you didn't pick, why you didn't pick it, why it isn't as good as what you did pick. So if you are for GMOs, I need scientific fact and evidence as to why. And I also need to know why you don't think they're bad. That's what you're doing. Call it whatever you want, persuasive essay, whatever. You're doing that. We are meeting again Friday. Yeah, today's Wednesday. It should be done by Friday. All right. So Friday, when I give you another lesson, this should be finished. So I'll probably start looking at them Friday, just to give you a heads up. So that's all I really got. Read the article I posted on the classroom yesterday. It's really cool with some of the wacky genetic engineering, and you'd fall into a rabbit hole. I mean, scientists do all kinds of crazy things just to see if it can be done. They grow ears on the backs of mice, and there was the banana one. There's the goat one that stood out for me. There was just a couple of really cool things. But go look, read about it. It's interesting. It's really cool to be able to mess around with something's DNA and change what it does. But it could be very, very, very dangerous as well. All right, I'm out. Go do your thing. It's 9:03. You have another half hour of this. So look at the 12-minute video. Start writing. If you have any questions, I'm not out. When I say I'm out, I mean I'm out live. I am here all day. I'm here from 8:20 to 3:30. So private message me, get in touch with me any way you can, and that's fine. I'm sticking with YouTube. The reason I'm sticking with YouTube is if I do WebEx or if I do Google Hangouts, first of all, it gets a little. First of all, there's not too many people that watch it live, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. I know you guys have a lot of things going on. But with YouTube, number one, I am live because you can comment if you need to talk to me right away. And also, it just automatically records right to the classroom. So you don't have to make it live, right? When I go live, I see 2, 3, 4, 5 people watching at the most sometimes. But then by the end of the day, I go and I check the views and there's 28 views per class, so everyone is eventually getting to it. So I think YouTube's a good way to go. It gets me talking lecturing to you. I don't have to worry about any other interruptions. And if there's only 2 people viewing and we're like on Google Hangouts and there's like 3 of us staring at each other, it's a little weird. So I'm just going to stick with YouTube. If there's any problem with that, let me know. But I think this is good. You can go to it anytime. You can look at it anytime. And I will always provide as much information, either whether it be answers to exit tickets, to whether it be really good hints on the test, or whether it be setting you up to write this thing like I did now. So I'm out. Be good. I'll talk to you guys soon.